And so we're just going to talk about the new module that's coming out, C-FUN. Does anyone know what the FUN stands for?
Fundamentals.
Yes, fundamentals. So a lot of you said you've already taught EC before, so that's a lot of it's going to stay the same as 2.0 EC. So in terms of fundamental, can someone tell me what we taught in the 2.0 EC? Nobody? Okay. Anna, since you were last, what's the difference between EC and then like our 3.0 classes?
Between EC and 3.0 classes, EC, like textbook based.
It's textbook based? Okay. Is there anything else? Tony?
You tackle all the fundamental skills.
Exactly. So for the 3.0, we're going to keep it the same where we do go through the fundamental skills. So the reading and the listening, speaking, and writing in the same class. Another thing that's, I think, key is that we're going to bring the CTP over to 3.0 as well. So since EC was 2 days a week, same thing for C-FUN. It'll be 2 days a week, day 1 being the fundamental skills with the grammars at the end, and then day 2 being the fundamental skills with the CTP at the end. So, a couple of things that we'll go over that many of you already may know is the program objective, the class structure. A lot of the class structure has stayed very much the same. The component rationales, and something that we're trying to really push is social learning. So we'll kind of talk about that as well and how we can tie that into C-FUN. And just what we've made more supplementary material rather than homework-based or required for the 3.0. So program objective, we've already kind of talked about the fundamental skills. So why would we want to teach fundamental all 4 to EC level kids? Well, EC is the highest or the lowest level?
Lowest.
Exactly. So we do want to give them enough of a foundation in order to move up and be able to communicate. So we are trying to make sure that they have their fundamental language skills in order to communicate with critical thinking. Okay, so first hour, someone that has taught EC would be very aware of this structure because it has stayed the same. So the first hour we start with the oral summary, which they take from their previous lesson. They've memorized either like a story mapping chunk or the storybook, and then they just present in the first 15 minutes. We are not scoring this. It's just to help them develop those memorization chunk skills. Then topic and chunks to enter them into the new topic and lesson for 10 minutes, listening for 10 minutes, reading for 25. In the second hour, it repeats, same thing. So instead of oral summary, we call it memorization. So it's of the lesson of the day. Same thing with the topic and chunks, reading and listening. And then finally, third hour, this is where it can change up. And for new teachers, it might confuse them, but if you've already taught 2.0 EC, it'll be very much the same, where we start with the memorization again from the previous hour, and then speaking, and then day 1 would be grammar and writing, day 2 would be the critical thinking project. So, oral summary. Can someone tell me why we do oral summary?
Well, it's good for them to learn how to summarize.
Yep, it's good to learn how to do the summarization skills. Yep. Richard?
See if they can pick up the main points and put it into full sentences.
Exactly. So being at an EC level, they can't make full sentences yet. So we're hoping to memorize little chunks of sentences. They can memorize those and develop their own sentences. So the other way, thing that I want to talk about is the method that we want them to memorize. So this is highly kind of facilitated and you're trying to teach them how to memorize. So for EC, there's a lot more teacher involvement, I think. For EC1, the oral summary, they call it story mapping, and it's from directly from their reading book. And it looks a little bit different in their workbook. And then that EC2 and 3, again, it's called story mapping, but it looks slightly different. So you'll notice that when you teach the EC, the C-Fun classes, the components are generally the same, but the component names might be slightly different. Okay, so I have a bunch of screenshots that are coming up to show you the different component names, but basically they're the same. So, topic and chunks. This is the intro into the first lesson. So what we want to do is make sure that we're going to familiarize them with vocabulary that is going to be in the storybook that they'll read as well as in the listening. So here actually when you're prepping your classes, you want to make sure, especially with 3.0, what do we use when we prep our classes now?
Media.
Exactly. So before, we might have just written it down and then put it on the board and kind of started the chunks that way and made sentences, but now we can use the media cards, do activities, drawing cards, multiple choice cards, those types of things to familiarize them with the chunks that will be in the book. And in 2.0 we had what's called a words to chunk book. That was their homework book. Instead of being homework, we've added it at the end of the Smart Textbook as a supplementary reference. So when you're prepping, just kind of skip back to the back of the book and check out the chunk words of the day, and then you can apply them in the topic and chunks lesson in the beginning. Okay? So again, the words to chunks books is just a reference at the end of the book. Okay. So, like I said, the component names might be slightly different depending on the book that you use, the track that you're using, and the level. So if you were doing an EC1 level, the topic and chunks could be called Picture Talk, or it could be called Open Your Eyes. But basically, they're the same thing. So just introduction into the lesson. For EC2 and 3, we call it Picture Talk. So I'm going to show you all of this when we open up the tab in a minute, but just again, letting you know that the names might be slightly different, but the same objective. Okay. Now for listening, when we do this, we want to make sure that they're practicing comprehension. So in 2.0, we would have taken their score and recorded it on their MERP, or so that it can all be recorded for their class grade. Being 3.0, we've transitioned where we don't want to take those comprehension scores. We've actually just made it a contribution score. So how much they can focus, how much they can participate. So we really want them just to learn how to do it and enjoy doing it rather than worrying about the score or guessing the answers. Okay, so same methodology as 2.0. You would, for the first hour, so the first and second hour, they both have a listening component. For the first hour, it's more guided by the instructor. So that's where you would play the audio track, pause it, discuss, play, pause, discuss. With the second hour, however, you want to make it more independent. So even though you're not tracking the score, you still want them to build that skill, the listening skill. So that's where you play the track once, the students listen, they write their answers down, and then you go over the answers with them. Okay? So the component names again, slightly different. EC1, we do open your ears and word and phrase match, so that'll be together. Now, sometimes you might notice when you have EC students right in the beginning, what's the biggest struggle with EC level, lowest level?
They can't talk.
They can't talk, they lack the skills, the fundamental skills. So with the listening and the reading in the first couple of weeks, it's okay if you can't get through all of the component within the listening. For instance, if you did the open your ears part here, maybe you won't get through all the word and phrase match. That's okay. So as you're building up their fundamental skills, then you can complete more of the task. And then you may optionally assign them to do it for homework. But again, we don't take homework grades, so it's more of if the student takes the initiative to do that at home. Okay. Okay. Next component is the reading. So same objective to build their reading comprehension skills, reading skills. And again, very, very similar methodology with listening. So in the first hour, it's very guided. In the second hour, it's more independent. So in reading for levels 1 through 3, these are the types of books that they'd be reading. So I can kind of pass those around so you'll get a feel for what type of level they'll be reading. You can just kind of browse through that. Now in these books, very different from our current like V1 books, is it has something other than text, which is what? Pictures. There's almost a picture on every page, okay? So when you're teaching EC, always try to start off with the picture. You know, discuss the picture, what's in the picture, get them thinking about those topics and chunks that you started in the first hour, and then move on to the actual reading. For EC level as well, I would recommend maybe asking the students to bring in a color pen or a highlighter so that you can underline key points as you're reading together. So when you're doing the guided reading, you would maybe select a student to read a sentence, and then as a class kind of discuss, and I say a sentence because EC1 there's like 5 sentences in the whole reading passage. So maybe 1 or 2 sentences, depending on the level. Discuss what's in that sentence, make the connections, and then move on to another student. So we're just allowing the students to practice even reading and speaking, because like Richard said, a lot of them can't even talk, they're really shy. So really guide them. And then for the remaining of the reading, let the student finish off the independent reading. Then you move on to the comprehension questions. So there's usually about maybe 3 to 5 comprehension questions, depending on the level. And you maybe want to assist the student with 50% of those questions. So if you've got 3 questions, maybe help them with 1 or 2, let the students finish the last one. Second hour, let the students do more of the question answering all by themselves and more of the reading by themselves. Okay? Do we have any questions about methodology? Okay, so another really good tool that we would emphasize in the reading part, because of the lack of comprehension skill and vocab skill, is, again, media cards. This is where I think, if I was teaching this, I would spice it up with more media cards, and then tying it with the comprehension questions. Okay, so component names. For EC1, book 1 and 2 for EC1 have a different format than books 3 to 6. So for book 1 and 2, you'll be able to see it as read aloud and think aloud. But for the remaining books, it'll be called read and think. Again, pretty much the same thing, just slightly different name and formatting. But same methodology, same objective. And then for the higher levels 2 and 3, we call it reading and thinking. So it's a little bit more question-based. All right. Now we return to memorization, so very, very similar to the first hour where we did the oral summary, but now they're memorizing what they just read. So this is in the beginning of the second hour. Okay. And like we said, we want to build their expression abilities. So in the program guideline that you have, that I gave as a handout, we have the methodology there. But basically what you're doing is guiding them. You're memorizing chunks of a sentence, so you practice with the kids, chunks of a sentence. Then you ask the students to memorize it by closing their books, but since we have a tab, you just flip the tab over, get them to memorize, and then just call on students to recite. And then you move on to the next sentence, and so on. I wonder if we have some guests outside that should be in here.
Oh, they're all trainers.
Oh, they're all trainers, okay. Okay, so then you would continue on for the rest, and then that's that. You can assign some of the memorization components as oral summary for the following day. So, this is where, again, a little bit confusing with the component names. In EC1, they have a page called Key Expressions. So that you can use as the oral summary, or the memorization, as well as the story mapping. So these are pretty much the same thing here. Again, if you're starting in the first couple weeks, the students might not even get to this component, and that's okay. So eventually by the end of the term, you want them to be able to complete this kind of thing. But maybe just pick and choose certain parts that you want them to memorize. And then, again, EC2 and 3, called story mapping. With the story mapping, for the last sentence here, there's going to be an audio button that you press, and the students listen to the audio, they write down the sentence, and then they memorize the sentences. That one. Okay, now for speaking, does anyone remember how we conduct the speaking? Okay, it's based on the pictures as well. So in the speaking component, they'll have a picture talk. So they'll have an image, and that's where you want to ask the students what's in the picture, what do you see, get those little vocab words out that they've been using throughout the class, and then you connect them into bigger sentences. So for instance, for EC1, we get a big image, something that's going to be relevant to the topic instruction that they will do for homework in their iLearning, and then the students just relate to it. Like if I was, here we have, I guess, a boat on a river. If I was on a river, what would I do? That kind of thing. So just getting them to relate to the picture and construct those sentences. EC 2 and 3, similar thing, except they get more pictures. So now you're going to break down what's in each picture and then connect them all using transitions. So if we can use simple transitions and also but, because. So that's what we're trying to help them develop here. Okay. Now to finish off the third hour of the class, again it depends on if it's the first day or the second day, would be either grammar, and they have different types of grammar depending on the lesson, or CTP. So we can go over the grammar first. Again, objective is more so to allow them to understand grammar points and be able to construct their sentences. So in EC1, they're going to have a sentence that they look at, and you kind of explain what it means, and you provide extra examples. So you have a very simple sentence, you provide examples, students would give you their examples and practice their sentences, then you give them a grammar point to add on to the sentence, and then they make their own sentences. So that's usually like the 3-step process. And so there it is for the EC1, and there it is for EC2 and 3. So very similar, just different names again. Now, I think one of the biggest, perhaps, fears and struggles of teachers coming from abroad would be, what do you guys think? Teaching this section.
I don't know grammar.
Exactly. I don't know grammar, and I don't know how to teach those grammar points. We will have guides. So, if you guys can remember in the 2.0, we had teacher guide books. So what we did is we did scan those. Okay. And in here, I'm just going to scroll down. You'll notice that it's exactly the same as what's on the tab with an additional guiding page. So let's see if I can find the grammar page here. Okay, so they go through how to do a proper sentence, and they actually will explain the grammar points for you right here, and explain how to teach that grammar point, and then how to ask questions to get more skills from the students, get them to practice. So there's no fear if you don't know grammar. We've got our teacher's guide handy. But again, these grammar points are very basic grammar points, so you shouldn't worry too much on that. Okay. Okay, moving on to CTP. CTP is going to be the same as before. It's usually a 3-step process. So can someone tell me what we did in CTP? What was like the first step of CTP? Not sure? Okay. Who's done CTP? Raise your hand. Okay, Anna, what's the first step of CTP?
Brainstorming?
Exactly. So brainstorm, get their ideas. Second step would be
Like doing their outline?
yes. They take all those ideas that we brainstormed as a class and we filter them. And they pick which ones they want. Third step, they make their project. They just put it together. Since it is only in the third hour and we conducted the picture talk at the beginning of the third hour, there's not that much time if you compare to C2 class or V1 class. But we still want the students to present We want them to use their tabs, we want them to, play with applications to make their CTP more fun, since it is every week that they're making a CTP, okay? So, here is where, since their CTP is now on their tab, definitely you want to use media cards. Put a lot of media cards in here to help them brainstorm so that all their projects are not the same. You may want to play around with different applications, so they could just use an application perhaps. Or what's been really successful, since, like Richard said again, students are scared to talk, maybe do cutout puppets, put them on popsicle sticks, let them film that. Or bring in Legos, let them film that. Use a voice changer so they're not so afraid. So this does not have to be the typical, the student brings the book up to class and they're just reading it. Please don't do that. Let them play around with their tab and explore that. Okay. So now I want to move kind of in the same line. When we're using our tabs, we're really trying to allow